won in places that people didn't expect because of a relentless focus on affordability, on making people's life just a little bit easier, just a little bit better. And in doing so, we sent a strong rebuke to Donald Trump.
And with that right here tonight, we have exclusive coverage for you tonight on WHAS 11 Plus. Our trip covering Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. He was speaking to Democrats in Nebraska on Friday night, November 7th. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being with us for this 30-minute special. I'm Doug Proffitt. This was our second trip following the governor. We've wanted to find out what he actually tells crowds outside Kentucky. We're looking for clues. Is he going to run for president for 2028? And what a political year 2026 is going to be for Kentucky. The U.S. Senate race, the Louisville mayor's race, and the big budget session for the Kentucky General Assembly in Frankfort. Joining us later are the best political analysts in Louisville, Republican Iris Wilbur Glick, the CEO and founder of IW Strategies, and Democrat David Tandy of Denton's law firm. He is, of course, the former president of the Louisville Metro Council. But first, we start with WHAS 11's political reporter Isaiah Kim Martinez, who once again covered the governor on the road. Isaiah, we've been listening for clues. Did you get a better couple of lines of clues this time around than before on these previous trips?
Doug, it's in bits and pieces, right? This is the third time that I've covered the governor outside of the state, right? The first time was in Iowa last year when he was sort of jockeying for Kamala Harris's VP spot. Then I covered at least part of the DNC when, of course, he had that primetime speech. And in this one specifically, I think it's safe to argue he brought up what America wants, what this country needs, more than we've heard, at least in any other out-of-state appearance I've seen.
But doesn't he have a deadline in 2026, whether we know what month it would be? But he's got to really, if he's going to make this run, he's got to make it here, what'd you think, in the next few months?
I think it's fair to argue, because still many folks around the country don't know who he is, that he would probably have to be one of the first or second people to announce. But the governor has made it very clear he is not giving a time frame, though he kind of gives you a little bit of a hint, right? He's going to be the Democratic Governors Association chair next year, a big position. There are 36 races for governor on the ballot basically a year from now. And in that role, he'll be in charge of making sure Democrats get elected to as many of those as possible. He has said he would not sit down with his family and consider a potential presidential role until that role as DGA chair is over. So you do the math there. It can't be any earlier than November or December of 2026.
So on this trip, you're just back from Nebraska?
Yes, back from Omaha as of just a few days ago. Obviously, it was a quick trip. It was also a trip that kind of came on the end of a very tough week in Louisville. There were questions whether the governor was even going to make it. There were questions of whether we were still going to go. We were covering this major breaking news story, heartbreaking story, 14 lives lost in Louisville because of this UPS plane crash. But the governor was busy all week. We were busy all week, and he was able to make it there for that speech Friday night, and so did we.
All right, here's what he told you in Omaha, Nebraska.
So I am standing here as living, breathing proof that Democrats can and should win everywhere in the United States of America.
Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says he wants a Democrat in the White House in 2028, as many speculate whether he himself will run for president. Listen carefully to Beshear's words, talking to a crowd of energized Democrats in Nebraska about access to health care and a good education.
That's what the American people want, and they know that's what I want for them.
Then there was his typical rallying cry to close his speech, but with a new twist.
Are you ready to elect a Democratic president in 2028? All right, Nebraska, we need you. We love you. Let's get out there and win. Thank you, Democrats.
He obviously sees himself as a contender for president of the United States.
Louisville Republican strategist Jake Cox, who watched Beshear's Nebraska speech online, tells me there are major flaws to Beshear's resume through a national lens.
Taking a look at what he's done for the Democrat Party here in the state of Kentucky, they've lost seats since he's been in office. The governor's out there trying to sell a pitch of this is how Democrats win elections, but in reality, this isn't how he's actually won elections here in the state of Kentucky.
He twice defeated a Trump-endorsed Mitch McConnell-backed candidate.
I asked Democrat Coleman Elridge, chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party, who introduced Beshear in Nebraska,
Andy Beshear,
if he heard a presidential candidate on stage.
He is a leader that this country needs and needs to hear from, because what he has shown in Kentucky is that he can bring people together and he can deliver results.
Beshear was on stage just days after Democrats swept key races in multiple states, including blue Virginia and New Jersey. And he was quick to tout victories in states that went for Donald Trump in 2024. The biggest test yet for Beshear's message will be in 2026, when he's in charge of helping Democrats win in 36 governor's races as chair of the Democratic Governors Association. In a one-on-one interview prior to his address, Beshear told me his goal is to change the map.
The American people are crying out for help. They're worried the American dream is no longer viable.
He believes the reason candidates like Zoran Mamdani won, a Democratic socialist and now mayor-elect of New York City, is because of a heavy focus on making things more affordable.
Do you agree with his policies, though, when it comes to freezing on the housing markets and things of that nature?
Well, when you're running for office, people want to see how passionate you are and what you promise to address. When you win office, you got to deliver.
As to when Beshear might consider a 2028 presidential run, he's staying firm that it's a conversation he'll have with his family after his time leading the Democratic Governors Association is done.
We're going to look around and we're going to say, am I the candidate that can help heal this country, or is it someone else? No timetable.
And with that, we're going to talk about it now. A lot to talk about the trip for the governor and so much more with the best political analysts in town. They've been joining us for years. David Tandy, the Denton Law Group here in Louisville, is a Democratic political analyst who advises Democratic candidates and is the former president of the Louisville Metro Council. And Iris Wilbur-Glick, the founder and CEO of IW Strategies and a political consultant to GOP candidates and others in Kentucky and around the country. Iris, you just watched Isaiah's story there. Do you think, depending on where the electorate's mindset is in 4 years from now after the Trump administration, does a guy like Andy Beshear have any shot at the White House?
Well, Doug, I think we need to get through the midterms, and I think that'll set the tone for a lot of what voters are demanding. And I do think it's notable, not only Governor Beshear, what we're seeing from, I think a couple different political figures that may be vying for the White House is sort of changing the rhetoric, right? Kind of toning down some of the rhetoric and focusing on wages and affordability. And so I think the governor's been pretty consistent on that, especially when he travels outside the state. One thing I'm catching, though, is he has this theme where he is trying to showcase his record of being able to bring people together across party lines. And I think that's sort of out-of-state Andy. What we experience in-state Andy is, it's rare that he walks across the street from the Capitol building to the legislature and has a real conversation about policy, about problem solving. And so while I think some of that may be effective as he's trying to increase his visibility and brand, I think it falls flat here at home where we've seen sort of the partisanship play out, particularly when it comes to developing policies and getting stuff done.
Well, that's why we sent you out of state to follow out of state Andy.
Well, because the message does change, and I think it's fair to say it probably changes for any candidate who's potentially seeking higher office in some way, shape, or form. David, I want to ask, when it comes to the governor, I've heard from political analysts in the past tell me that it just matters what the biggest issue is when it comes time to vote for these candidates, whether it be in the primary. It's often difficult to project this right now sitting in 2025, but what do you see right now as maybe Beshear's biggest strength if he were to decide to run for the White House, and maybe his biggest weakness that he would have to overcome?
I think the biggest strength that he has right now is that he is a Democratic governor in an overwhelmingly red state, right? So he can, that argument about being able to reach across the aisle and talk to people, that argument works because it's not about reaching across the aisle and talking to hardened politicos who, if we had the conversation, you ask them, are we sitting here at the middle at night? And they say, no, the sun is shining outside, which because of the partisanship that's there. But what the people of Kentucky, who elected him twice, and his leadership through, COVID, through those difficult times, through, the weather incidents that we've had, Republicans and Democrats and independents alike have seen him reach out to them. Well, how can I help you? And he's provided aid to them regardless of party. And that's what the voters are most concerned about is how will this person who's putting themselves up for office, how will they help make my life better? And that's the key.
Iris, your view of November 4th and the victories for the Democrats, especially the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York. Do you think that continues here as we go into 2026?
I don't put a lot of weight in what happened last Tuesday, mostly because if I shift my focus away from New York, which is predominantly Democratic. I can't remember, it's been a while since a Republican has led in sort of, I think, modern times in conservative ways. So it's been several terms since we've seen a Republican be successful up there. But if we look at the gubernatorial races, I mean, these states have historically been mostly blue. And so I'm not losing sleep at night for the conservative cause, but I do think it's a wake-up call to the midterm elections to ensure that candidates up and down the ballot are paying attention to what's resonating around kitchen tables, that affordability piece, how the economy is impacting wages and economic opportunities. That is the focal point, and that will dominate, I think, the campaigns going into the midterms. Up and down the ballot, and we'll see that here at home too.
And we're going to hear from Beshear. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but on that same point, I agree with Iris. You don't read a whole lot into off-year elections. Like whether they be the ones in Virginia and New Jersey, or in 27 it'll be Kentucky and Louisiana. But there are some things that you can tease out from those as well. So go down to Mississippi. There were two races that happened down there, one for the Senate, the other one for the House, that actually brought the House under Democratic control in red Mississippi, right? Then there's 13 seats that got flipped in Virginia from red to blue in a state like in there as well. Plus, don't forget the New Jersey race was a buck of history. Because going back all the way to 1960, the party that was out of power in the White House would always lose. So in this case, a Republican was supposed to win the New Jersey governorship because you have Republicans in the White House. That didn't happen this time. And so there is something to be said there that you can learn from. Like right now, the focus is on the economy, it's on affordability. And so I think that will get everybody's focus back on that. When we're talking about presidential politics, we have to see what happens in 27 and what themes come out there.
And obviously, a big role we talked about for the governor is heading the Democratic Governors Association, the 36 races for governor next year across the country. Mm-hmm. And he had this to say, essentially suggesting that the best chance Democrats have at winning the presidency in 2028 is to first win governor's races next year.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to fight in 2028 and have our next president determined in more than 5 states with zero margin of error, we've got to flip a lot of governor's mansions. I'm going to be out all next year, and we are going to win governor's races in places that you would never expect.
Iris, is this the big test for Andy Beshear? I mean, will this haunt him if he doesn't have that kind of success that he just described?
Sure, and that's my viewpoint. Most of that, Doug, for going into the midterms here, the governor stepping into that DGA role, equivalent to RGA, right? And so when you're in that leadership role, I mean, you have one job, and it's to either protect, these governor's mansions or to flip them. And so I think, Governor Beshear is just in a position where he has to sell a bill of goods, right? He has to be the #1 cheerleader for these gubernatorial races. He'll be in a leadership role, leading the fundraising efforts for these gubernatorial races, outside efforts to provide air support for the respective candidates. And so he needs to get through the midterm cycle so he has something to stand on, sort of increase his national visibility and brand, be able to tout that success. If he has some higher aspirations, that'll be a huge stepping stone.
And David, depending on the results, say that the results work in his favor, could we see an announcement soon after? I mean, how do you see that sort of playing out?
Yeah, I certainly could see that. I mean, actually, as I think about the way that this is shaping up, I actually go back and I think about a Bill Clinton. Here's a Democratic governor from a small southern state. So we're not playing electoral politics math, with this. But what gave Clinton credibility and exposure on the national level was kind of like what he was doing as governor, as part of the DGA, kind of leading that. Beshear has that opportunity here. Going around the country, he's campaigning for everybody, helping gubernatorial candidates kind of craft their message, trying different test balloons with different messaging. He's building up his own personal donor base as a result of this, right? Because, you're asking people to donate to these different races, and then you've got the Rolodex when it's your turn.
Now, you both will find this interesting. Isaiah, you had a surprise. It turned out to be a surprise guest at the last minute for this appearance.
We had planned this trip when it was just the governor, before former President Biden announced that, hey, he's going to headline this event. And you want to talk about building a base, right? The big question, or a question of mine, was, is he going to get the support of some of the folks in the Biden circle? Does he want that support? Does he want to be photographed kind of side by side by the former president? And we actually heard from the former president mentioning the governor specifically.
Spent a lot of time with Andy when I was vice president and as president. Kentucky got the living hell kicked out of him by the weather. I mean, I've been to every part of that state working like hell just to keep it open. And I mean it sincerely. This is a guy who knows what he's doing. He does it well. And he doesn't ask whether it's a red or blue part of the state. He just gets it done.
They never appeared together on stage, though, did they, Isaiah? You were there.
They hadn't. The governor actually spoke first, and he left soon after speaking. So you actually heard former President Biden there say, the governor had to leave, but I'm going to talk about him. So they were sitting about 3 seats apart. I'm not going to overanalyze that, but they were there for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. So, Iris, as we go into this race, is there any issue for Andy Beshear to be appearing with Joe Biden?
I think time will tell, but I would be interested in David's thoughts, sort of what the inter-party sort of turmoil may or may not be.
Is it politically risky, I guess? Because you could see that would be probably red meat for Republicans to say, okay, he's just...
Listen, at this stage in the game, anything is red meat for Republicans. I mean, let's be completely honest about it. I mean, he could be sitting next to Pope to the Pope, and they'd say, he's sitting next to that liberal from Chicago. I mean, come on now. So, I mean, I think when you're looking at this, what if I were in the governor's shoes? Yes, I want Biden supporters to be a part of my team. I also want Harris supporters to be a part of my team. I want Obama folks. I want Clinton folks. I want everybody. I want my Namdami folks to be a part, of the team too, because we're trying to build a big tent. So at this stage in the game, there's a lot of tea leaf reading, but I wouldn't get down into it.
The one notable thing, though, I will say, I think, I feel like every presidential cycle, the creep happens earlier and earlier when folks, are trying to pick a team and sort of make these predictions. One thing I'll add to what David just described, though, is, I think there's going to be sort of this crossroads of the Beshear circle trying to reconcile what I would view as sort of in the pursuit of becoming the nominee type of campaigning, rhetoric and messaging, and what the governor will be focused on. And then if he were to become the Democratic nominee, what does the general election sort of Andy Beshear look like? And I do think there's a difference when you're courting sort of the more progressive portion of the Democratic Party versus building that broad appeal.
And on that point, you talk about broad appeal. I did notice that there was a bit of a tone shift between how the governor talked about the former president when he was on stage. Of course, the former president was right there, versus the way he talked about him with me when I asked him about his legacy in a one-on-one interview.
He was there to help. I am deeply grateful for that. Mr. President, thanks for a lifetime of service to our country.
What do you believe his legacy?
All right, there you have it.
Well, I think we want to probably cue that up again. We just heard the governor speak on the podium, but then there was a period where it was a back and forth. If we can cue that back up.
Let us know if you can, but first we'll get back. Here it comes for you, the sound again, 2 different contrasts for you.
What do you believe his legacy is?
A number of his bills helped us to announce and continue some pretty massive economic development projects. I believe he tried to lead with values and with goodness.
So a little muted, right? If I say you lead with values and kindness versus you tried to lead with that, it might be picking and choosing, but these politicians, they know what they're doing.
David's face.
Am I reaching? Am I playing reporter here?
You'll remember, we've done these trips to listen to him closely to see if there's that tone shift that you've been talking about. Let's dive into the U.S. Senate race. Should Andy Beshear be running in the U.S. Senate race in Kentucky? Many Republicans have said, I think think even Mitch McConnell has said, I wouldn't want him in this race against me.
Yes, there have been statements, but I mean, the governor's been crystal clear, and I think actions speak louder than words. I mean, he's moved on. He's moved on. He's not really spending time and energy. And my understanding is, the folks that are on the ground that are particularly plugged into the Senate race, we're looking at how the deck is stacked. Maybe a candidate or two join the field, but no, not Governor Beshear.
Well, let's show you the candidates. And Isaiah, you've interviewed a lot of these folks.
Yep.
Here are the candidates for the Kentucky Democrats. Logan Forsythe, who's a former Secret Service agent. Amy McGrath, you know her name. She's been in it before. Pamela Stevenson of Louisville, and Joel Willett, who's a former CIA agent. Interesting the jobs these two men had.
Yeah, fairly
and
I'm sorry. Democrats, right?
The Republicans, yes, Congressman Andy Barr, former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron on your screen, and Lexington businessman Nate Morris, who grew up in Louisville, attending Eastern High School, and you interviewed him at Eastern High School.
Yeah, I did. And,
to your point, too, with Democrats, especially in 2025, it's common to see a lot of sort of law enforcement background, right? They sort of try to tout that, they're for law and order, even though they got a D by their name. So I don't think it's surprising that we're seeing folks like a former CIA official, former Secret Service agent. I'll open the floor up to you guys. I mean, what's your take on sort of the candidates? I guess, David, if you want to start with the Democrats specifically, I mean, do we expect more to come in? Is there a front runner here?
You very well, even as seemingly as late as this is in the kind of like in the calendar, particularly for the Democratic primary, you very well may have a couple more.
You hearing any names?
I am hearing names, but
Let's hear
it was
names.
Said off the record.
Oh, okay.
And so, as such, we will.
Well, let's
we'll
throw out a name.
Hear from folks.
The very well-known horse trainer at Churchill Downs, Dale Roman's been considering this race. That's been reported. Would he be a game changer?
His name has been floated. There's been nothing, yeah.
Been floated as a possible candidate, but it's out there. If he were to get into this race, would that be a game changer?
I don't necessarily, at this stage, and I will couch my comments. At this stage, I don't necessarily see it as such. I've never seen him, on the stump or out talking to people and hearing what his theory of the case is as it relates to this particular race. So we'll have to kind of like wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what resources are behind him in order to get his message out there. So we'll see how that goes. When Isaiah, when you were talking about a little bit earlier about the type of candidates and their backgrounds in terms of like who's running for office from the Democratic side, for me, it's not anything surprising in the sense that, for us, we have people of all different walks of life, who would step out there and run for office. So it's encouraging, the folks that, that we're seeing, at this particular time.
Iris, I was talking with Jake Cox today. Obviously, we saw in the story Republican strategist here in Louisville. And I asked him a little bit about the Senate race, like, who's the front runner right now? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And I feel like I am hearing kind of across the board, Daniel Cameron will be the front runner if the race was today or if the primary was today. But 2 months down the line, Andy Barr has plenty of cash on hand. Nate Morris has all these sort of big name, outside influence guys from all across the country. I mean, how do you sort of divvy up where we are right now?
Yeah, so we have a little bit of time on the clock, right? It's weird, right, David? It's like the Senate race it started forever ago, and the primary cannot get here soon enough. But the thing is, I think time on the clock matters. So once we turn the calendar, the candidate filing deadline closes early January. So we'll know exactly how each side, how the deck is stacked. So assuming it's just the 30 top Republicans here that stay in the Senate race, you need cash to get your message out. And so, yes, I think there's a lot of understanding that if the primary election were held today, not in May, that former Attorney General Cameron has some, tremendous name ID across the Commonwealth, has been on the ballot several times now, and so has that advantage. But once these candidates turn up that burn rate of campaign cash, and, if I were the other two candidates, right, the action is the primary. I think there's a lot of anticipation that the action will just be in the primary. So being able to burn through that till May, I think the dynamics change.
Well, doesn't the Democratic primary become more fascinating, though? Say a character like Romans were to get into it. He's been described as maybe more of the Wendell Ford type of Democrat in the past. With the high negatives on Amy McGrath, would he have a good shot at name recognition there, too, in the primary?
I mean, I can only speculate being sort of a rank and file Kentucky Democrat voter, but I don't think sort of the national profile nature of this race changes. Doug, I think, not that outsiders dictate Kentucky races, but when we talk about potential outside spend, resources, endorsements playing a role in this, it's all on the Republican side.
I think what you're going to look at, for the Senate race is concerned, and let's say from the Democrat side, the first thing for the Democrats would be we go through the primary, we find out who's going to be the best person who can then kind of articulate the message that's going to resonate with the most folks here in Kentucky, right? And talking about just kitchen table issues. How can I, as your senator, make your life better? The tagline that I've been watching in all of the kind of Republican ads, because that's been fascinating to me, watching the Republican race, where, like, Isaiah, to your point, Daniel Cameron is polling higher than everybody else in the race, but the fight is between Barr and Morris, right?
And it's mostly been Morris on the airwaves. Barr just has one air. It's been super PACs kind of on the back.
Right, but, well, it's,
but does name recognition win a race?
Name recognition does, but the point that I'm trying to make here is the tagline that, because essentially what Morris and Barr are trying to do is to see who can get President Trump's endorsement. Right. And Barr's tagline is, Morris is for something else, but I'm for Trump, right? Now, if I'm the Democrat and I'm hearing that, when it comes now, we get past the primary, and I have the resources to do it, I am hammering, Andy Barr isn't for you. He's for whoever the guy is that's in the White House. But I am for you, Mr. and Mrs. Kentuckian, and I'm going to fight for your issues. And so that'll be interesting just to see how that plays out as we go along. Because we're a long way away, and it's hard to kind of like really read the tea leaves or kind of prognosticate
Still 6 months.
what it is. So, yeah, you have to.
But the finer point to this, too, for the Kentucky Senate race is that even in midterms, we experienced low voter turnout in these primaries. So think about the type of voter, type of voter that's going to make the effort to show up on a random Tuesday in May. That's not sort of a big ticket presidential year.
And I get that from Barr's perspective and Morris, what they're trying to do. I totally understand it because you're trying to speak to those voters. But what you worry about is, I may have won this battle, but does it hurt me in terms of the war that we're fighting later?
And you have to wonder who splits votes, right? What candidates are in voters' minds may be similar, so maybe they split the vote, and then whoever comes out third sometimes goes in front.
Well, that's fair, too.
Real quick, I want to touch on, I was watching TV last night. I saw an ad. It looked like a newer one from Nate Morris, where he specifically brought up Don Trump Jr. on his podcast. He said, I'm the Don Trump Jr. guy, like he likes me. And then he brought up, I believe it was another it was J.D. Vance, and he brought up someone else who doesn't live in Kentucky. Iris, I want to get your take on this. Kentuckians have to vote for this guy, right? I mean, how does that play in your mind?
Listen, he's campaigning to one person and one person only, and that's the president. And so we'll see ultimately if the president engages in the Senate race. And I think dynamics could absolutely shift if we do get these sort of big outside endorsements. But I think that's the question. Like, is that compelling to Kentucky voters, the type of voters that show up in May? I mean, I think about my household. I mean, we're naturally plugged in. We vote every cycle. But I mean, if I go down the street and knock on a neighbor's door, are they even aware that they have an opportunity to vote in May and a very influential, open Senate seat and to participate in a primary?
So the big question, who gets Donald Trump's endorsement? Who gets it? Is it Nate Morris, who broke the story on the podcast that Isaiah referred to and is close to J.D. Vance?
Who also endorsed Nikki Haley in the presidential race? I don't know, Doug. That's going to be, I think
Come on, Iris. Who gets the
president
endorsement?
has a very sensitive and deep memory on things like that. And so I think, record and actions and behaviors matter to the eyes of the president. And so loyalty, I think, could be in question there. Whereas you have someone who's been in the congressional delegation, who has a voting record, who actually has taken votes in support of the president's agenda, the first term and in the present term. And so, I mean, we'll see. I'm not going to pretend to get in the mind of the president. He could probably change it a couple times over. But I think if actions inform his decision, I think there's something to look at both Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron in ways that they have visibly shown up for the president in very visible public ways. And then you have an individual, Nate Morris, who, is trying to latch on to that brand with sort of the America First agenda, but doesn't have doesn't have a voting record, so to speak.
And we know the president oftentimes waits quite a bit to make these endorsements. I mean, it could be a while if he does.
If at all. Again, we could just point to in the Virginia gubernatorial race, he did not endorse there. He did in New Jersey. So,
We've got a lot more to talk to you about because we have a mayor's race, which of course is going to be nonpartisan for the first time. It's Craig Greenberg. And next year, Louisville's 2026 election takes place. Last month, Mayor Greenberg announced his plan for the re-election campaign. Here's what he said.
I like that. I like that.
There's the announcement. As he said, he was running again. Of course, we know he's a Democrat. So far, the mayor's unchallenged. So, David, we'll start with you on the Democratic side. Anybody else going to get in this race?
As I said in the Senate race, I
hear
off the record.
I hear rumblings that potentially some folks could get in it because this race is going to be interesting in the sense that it's a completely new dynamic. Now, if you want to get wonky and kind of get into political campaigns and whatnot, it'll be interesting to run in a nonpartisan race versus in a partisan race in terms of with the primary, right? And then things look different in the general. So
maybe down the road, but right now we know whether they're Republicans or Democrats.
You do, but what I'm talking about, it's even more than that. It's more about, it's tactical in the sense that, so if the race were just two individuals, well, one, what that tells you is we're going all the way to November, and it's just those two folks. So they're going to be doing different things between now and
for
May
a longer
19th.
period of time.
But for a long time. If you're having three candidates, okay, now it's triangulation here, and so now is it similar kind of like what we're seeing in the U.S. Senate race, right? Will one candidate attack another one, and then that gives room for somebody to slide through the middle who's maybe unknown or is less polarizing than the other two. So there's that. Then you can get into if there are 5 or more candidates that are in the race. Well, now you're talking about I can win and get out of the primary with maybe 20% of the vote or less. And now, so you can kind of get these unlikely candidates that get you to the general and have some upset.
Well, Isaiah, we haven't heard of any Republicans in the race, have we?
There's a sense right now, and I've heard this from multiple people, that many GOP members, both in the General Assembly and out, like Craig Greenberg for a Democrat. They like sort of how his priorities have lined up with some of theirs. He doesn't maybe push back in the same ways, or in their words, work in silos the way maybe Greg Fisher in their minds did. So as of right now, I've not heard any names or even an intention to put up a serious candidate.
You want to break any names, Iris?
No, I don't have any names.
Because they'd be asking you for advice.
I don't have any names, so no breaking news coming from me tonight. But, I think if we just observed, again, how Kentucky elections, how Louisville elections and campaigns are typically managed, if there were a formidable resource Republican or conservative, since it's nonpartisan, individual running to be that contrast to the mayor, I would have advised them to announce early, build that momentum, anticipate. Ideally, it would be that November head-to-head, but if you had to do the runoff situation in May to pick off and get the top 2 vote getters, you have time on the clock to raise the resources. What we observed, over 3 years ago, the Republican nominee at the time just didn't have the resources to get their message out and was competitive. But
Well, I had a close associate of Rand Paul tell me, we said it this way, we are not running a Republican against Craig Greenberg. We like him.
I think efforts, resources, and energy we better spend in pickup opportunities. There's going to be a concerted effort to maintain and pick up seats, so to speak, on Metro Council. And again, those races too are nonpartisan, so they won't have the R&D flair, at least visibly. But I think recruiting candidates, running professional campaigns to put pro-business, pro-economic development individuals on council, I think there's going to be some real opportunities. That may feel a little bit conservative and Republican.
Right. It's all about where you feel like the resources are best spent, right? If you feel like council's flipping, right? I mean, you're obviously former Metro Council president. I mean, I'm sure you could see maybe them pushing more on that end.
Has Greenberg done a good job?
Oh, I have no problem with in terms of like the way that he's run the city. I think you can talk to people across the city. There are those who are satisfied with what he's done. There will be others who will say you have turned a blind eye to certain parts of the city, and so I've heard some rumblings there too, to where he can do a better job there, and that's going to be part of his campaign, where he's going to have to make that case to the broader community about that. The reality is that when you are running against an incumbent, unless they have done something that has truly put a sour taste in a broad spectrum of the public's in their mouth, you're not going to beat an incumbent, because they have name ID in the bully pulpit. You would need to have somebody who is extremely well resourced. And by resource, we're talking about has money behind them.
And announcing early.
And even to a certain extent, if they are self-funding and they've got more money than they know what to do with, they can throw it at the airwaves and organization on the ground, knocking on doors to make
What do you think, Iris?
Versus a statewide, which
right.
take more
time. One thing, Doug, I did want to get to when we were talking about Isaiah. You asked the question about resources as it relates to Metro Council and it flipping. The truth of the matter is, now that Metro Council is nonpartisan, there really is no flip that we're talking about. Even when we had it before, when it was Democrat and Republican, and if you look at the way that the council is constituted now, with the way that the chairmanships are split and who controls what committees and how those are done. And as a matter of fact, you can't kill a bill in the committee. Everything's going to come out to the floor anyway, whether it's voted up positively or negatively in committee.
So it
makes it more.
I do want to ask Iris that question. Do you think Greenberg's done a good job as mayor? As a Republican
I think he's demonstrated
strategy?
a willingness to be an active listener and to showcase Louisville in positive ways that we haven't seen before. Particularly, it's reflective in how we've been able to bring resources home from Frankfurt, from state capital.
Now, Isaiah, I know you're awfully excited for January because it's a budget year and how Kentucky spends its money coming up with the General Assembly. You're going to be covering it. Iris wants to talk about that. Let's sort of dive in. What are you hearing of some of the top issues?
Well, I mean, obviously the budget is always going to be first and foremost every couple of years. And I think the wrinkle in this year, and Iris, you can attest to this, is some of the changes that we've seen with the OBBB, right? One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and sort of how that trickles down. I mean, lawmakers will have a big decision to make on what they're going to sort of fill in the gaps, if there are any.
Gap is one way to characterize Isaiah. I mean, HR 1, I mean, sort of what states are now on the hook to cover these gaping holes, particularly these federally run programs like SNAP, like Medicaid. I'm not going to call it budget busters yet, but I mean, it's going to be a challenge to balance this budget while maintaining spending levels. Remember, Kentucky, we're on track to have another half-point reduction in the income tax, right, in the state income tax. But that is contingent upon a ratio of spend and revenue that we bring in. And so we're currently at 4%. Come January of 26, we're going to realize a 3.5%. And then in session, there's going to be an expectation to put the trigger in place, right, to realize another half percentage point for January of 2027. All of that still has to be on notice of ensuring that the budget is balanced. And
well, let's talk priorities.
Bring resources.
Where do you see the priority, number one, spending?
So they're going to have to figure out how they properly fund Medicaid. And there'll be some challenging conversations, the impacts to MCOs, the impacts to coverage, how this impacts rural hospitals. I mean, we can be here all night talking about Medicaid.
Because Medicaid's like the second biggest item in the budget, something like, it's education than Medicaid, isn't it?
Medicaid is the largest component when we talk about just flat out spend and the size of government, so to speak, to support Medicaid and Medicaid services. I mean, we've just seen sort of the national focus on SNAP benefits, and there's been major reforms, eligibility criteria that's been reassessed, that's dictated by the federal government, but the state's portions to float that. I mean, those are two big expenditures that the state's going to have to reconcile. And then we're talking about, education, pensions. We got to fund the road plan for 2 years, design it for 6. I don't know about you all that live out in the East End, but what we've experienced like River Road and 22 and 42, road improvements I think have started. I mean, I think they've always been a priority and top of minds of Louisvillians, but road plans matter, making sure that we're properly resourced on that front. There's going to be a lot of action when they gavel in the first Tuesday after the first Monday in January.
Yeah. David, how do you see this playing out? I mean, do you see, as far as some of the budget priorities, but also maybe some of the other, I mean, we know JCPS's budget deficit has caught a lot of attention from Republican lawmakers to say, okay, look, the board doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, what do you sort of see playing out?
I think there will, just with the makeup of the way that the legislature is right now, there's going to be a lot of attention always given to JCPS just because it's the largest school system in the state. It's in a Democratic city. Most of the folks who are running the school board are Democrats. So you're gonna have that going on. The same issues that JCPS are facing, but I would argue are the same issues that are being faced in Davis County. We just don't hear about them, but they're happening there as well. I think across the board, though, the priorities there's some common ground there. To where if we put the focus on how we're going to make sure that those who need SNAP benefits are able to get them, and those who need them are broader than I think way a lot of people think. In our minds, we just think it's just some of the smaller destitute folks.
Like not people you see every day.
Yeah, but we're talking about people who are actually like maybe working the TSA line at the airport. Yeah. Working families need that help and that assistance.
Let's reel it back to JCPS, such an important entity in our community, And the Republican Jason Nemes here in Louisville has said basically the bell is going to toll for JCPS if they don't get the act together, and that he's giving Yearwood, the superintendent, some time, right, Isaiah, to get this thing going. I know it's a budget year coming up, but he's talked about once again breaking the district up.
Yearwood has said that he's been given a grace period. Didn't really specify beyond that. Jason Nemes has brought up the word right-size the district. I mean, there's a difference between what gets said and what gets done, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think JCPS will absolutely be a top priority in the General Assembly in both the House and Senate, and both entities are controlled by Republicans. I think the most recent budget challenges that have come to light is just another sort of illustration of of why Frankfort Republicans are frustrated at the largest school district. I mean, remember at the top of the year, the district formed a tax revenue task force to explore quote unquote brand new revenue. Now, I think when the issue's nuanced, right? I think those of us that pay attention, there's a difference between making sure that the district can make payroll, deal with deferred maintenance, but, I think getting to the core of has district leadership managed finances well and put the district in a strong position. I think Frankfort wants to weigh in on that, and they have the ability, they have the statutory ability to do so. I think my encouragement would be is to take a scalpel to the problem, and that we want solutions that are going to benefit children. We're talking about real policy solutions that support children. So I'm eager to get involved and to weigh in. But I think when it comes to the state's ability to influence the district, remember JCPS's operating budget is the second largest operating in the Commonwealth. Only second to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so I think folks, particularly here at home, that are frustrated with Frankfort meddling, I mean, all those 138 legislators are on the hook for the outcomes of this district.
I don't think I've ever heard that budget described that way. That's amazing. Well,
$2 billion.
It is larger than I remember looking at it when I was in the city council. I was like, I didn't realize that budget it's that big. But think about everything that school system does, and as a matter of fact, going beyond that, JCPS is critical to the economic development of the city of Louisville, beyond just educating our next generation of workforce, but for the folks now providing quality child care for it. Now we can couch it in terms of like you're supposed to educate, but at the end of the day, you're talking about when the reason why people get so upset when JCPS has to shut down school or missing days or things are happening with the buses is because it messes with the child care that a lot of our employers are relying upon for folks to get to and from work. The Chromebook computers that are provided to the students to do their homework are also the same devices that their parents can then use to access the internet for other things, because we have to recognize the imbalance that we have in terms of resources that people have. So there's a big job that Dr. Yearwood and Dr. Schul, who's the board chairman for JCPS, and the rest of the folks who are running JCPS, that they have to do with that system.
We're going to wrap up this conversation because it's not even 2026 yet, and we are talking about major. You all excited about the upcoming political years?
I mean, you know, every election is fun.
Iris, I know you're.
I will say this: like with our kids, when we were growing up, we raised our kids. It wasn't about like we would watch a football game, right? And it wasn't about who are we cheering for. It's like who are we voting for? That's the importance of elections to us. So
we've always heard. I mean, like this is the most important election of our lifetime. So here we go. Buckle up. 2026 arrived a long time ago, and we're be at the turn of the calendar, and we will not be bored.
Well, all right. Continue to follow Isaiah's excellent political reporting for WHAS 11, as we've got a lot to tell you in 2026, then 2027, and maybe even 2028. I'm Doug Proffitt for David Tandy and Isaiah Kim Martinez and Iris Wilberg-Lick. Thank you very much for watching this Your Voice, Your Vote special from WHAS 11 News on WHAS 11 Plus.